Iran's attack on Israel is raising fears that a regional war will engulf the Middle East. Iran has launched hundreds of drones and missiles against Israel following the Israeli assassination of its senior generals in Syria, with the overwhelming majority of the drones being intercepted. It was Iran's first ever direct attack on Israel, marking a dangerous moment in the shadow war the two countries have been engaged in for years. But an escalation of tensions is not something Iran wants. Middle East expert Nader Hashemin joins me now. Good morning and thank you for being with us this morning. I wonder whether we can go back to April 1st and what we understand about why Israel targeted the Iranian consulate in Syria.
Well, this is part of a long-standing, what's called a shadow war between these two regional hegemons in the region, hitting each other's targets. What's significant about April 1st was that it struck several high-ranking Iranian generals and military officers, including Iran's lead general responsible for coordinating Iran policy in the region. It's widely viewed as an escalation and a reckless act because it took place at the Iranian diplomatic compound in Damascus. And so in many ways, Israel upped the ante with that type of attack. And of course, it took, if you know the backstory, it took place against a series of rising attacks by Israel against Iranian military forces, both throughout the region and within Iran, going back several years. So I think Iran has calculated that it needed to sort of demonstrate that it has the capacity to push back. And what I'm reading from Tehran today is they're trying to establish new rules of deterrence against Israel to prevent these types of attacks from happening. The big fear now is how is Israel going to respond, and will that respond just take us up the escalatory ladder toward a broader regional war?
Yeah, I wonder whether we can go back again and talk about that. This is the first time an attack was launched from Iranian territory, right? So how significant was that?
Well, it's significant because it's the first time it's happened. It's pretty clear if you follow what's been happening over the last roughly 24 hours. Iran launched those attacks, drones and missiles, not to produce casualties, but to produce a spectacle. And a spectacle meaning to demonstrate to the Israel and to its allies West that it has the capability of ratcheting things up unless there are new rules of engagement that are established that prevents attacks on high-value Iranian targets. In fact, the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, a man by the name of Hossein Salami, just said a few hours ago that that's precisely what Iran is trying to do, establish new rules for deterrence. And if Israel continues to hit high-value Iranian targets, Iran is going to hit back. And so we're in very dangerous territory here.
Yeah, I wonder whether Iran really had any other choice but to retaliate against Israel's attacks. How would no response from Iran have looked from the outside, internationally?
Well, it would have effectively invited more attacks. Like there's these rules of engagement in international affairs between regional rivals that if you don't respond to an attack, then you invite more attacks. It's sort of like the two bullies in a playground who can't sort of annihilate each other. They tend to realize that, look, we have to sort of respect certain rules of engagement and recognize the existence of the other, knowing that we have to be somewhat measured in how we deal with our regional adversaries. So that's basically what's going on. I mean, I don't want to come across as apologizing for the Islamic Republic of Iran because it's a very nasty regime. It executes more people than any other country in the world with the exception of China. And Israel is also, in my view, a regime that leaves a lot to be desired. It's widely viewed by the human rights community as guilty of the crime of apartheid. And in the context of Gaza, let's not forget, Israel stands plausibly accused of violating the UN Genocide Convention over actions in Gaza over the last 6 months. So these are two destabilizing in the middle, and they're dragging this region, it looks like, to war. And I think Joe Biden has a lot to answer for because I view his mishandling of the crisis in Gaza as directly responsible for what we're seeing right now.
You've brought up President Biden, so let's go there. What do you make of the US's response so far? I know that they've drawn a line in the sand, that it will not participate in potential Israeli counterattack. What do you make of the US's response?
I read it as an attempt to de-escalate this crisis, to send a clear signal to Israel that if Israel wants to go after targets in Iran, the United States is not going to participate. I think behind the scenes, there's an attempt to get Israel to not go after targets in Iran. And if it's going to respond to perhaps hit targets in the region, proxies that are not of high value, hoping that that won't sort of lead to the escalation that many of us are fearing. So I think the United States is trying to de-escalate, but I think in many ways it could be too late. I think the inability or refusal of Joe Biden to rein in Benjamin Netanyahu, who I think really is trying to sort of get out of this quagmire in Gaza by broadening this war and going after high-value Iranian targets, hoping that he could drag the United States into a war and score some sort of military victory that he could then translate into sort of a political claim back within Israel, where he's very unpopular. That's the only way he survives this war in Gaza. I think that's in many ways what's driving this. But the United States is Israel's biggest backer. If it wanted to rein in Netanyahu to stop the types of attacks that we started this conversation with, like the one on the Iranian diplomatic compound on April the 1st, it could do so. But Biden refuses to do so, and I think we're all paying the price for the failure of Joe Biden's leadership in the Middle East.
Middle East expert Nader Hashemin joining us this morning from Denver. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.